There's a man in South Park, Colorado who has a doctorate in geology, a house, a wife, 2 kids, and a stable career. By every measure the American dream uses to decide whether a person has made it, he has made it. He also once put his private parts in a microwave to qualify for a doctor's note. He bought a dead Blockbuster store and slowly lost his mind inside it. He moved his entire family to a cannabis farm without asking anyone if they wanted to go. He strangled Winnie the Pooh for a trade deal, and he ended up old, alone, and estranged from his son, still convinced the next scheme was the one. South Park has been telling one story for 27 seasons. Most people missed it because it was dressed up as a comedy about foul-mouthed children in Colorado. It was always about the American dream and what it does to the people who believe in it. Welcome to East Park. Let's get into it. The architecture of Randy Marsh, building the American dreamer. There is a man in South Park, Colorado who has a doctoral degree in geology. He has a steady job. He has a house. He has a wife who stays with him through everything. He has 2 kids. By every measure that American society uses to decide whether a person has made it, Randy Marsh has made it. He cleared every checkpoint. He did everything right. And yet, across 27 seasons of television, this same man microwaves his own private parts to get a doctor's note, buys a dead Blockbuster store and slowly loses his mind inside it, moves his entire family to a cannabis farm in the middle of nowhere without asking anyone if they want to go, and ends up old, alone, and estranged from his son, still convinced that one more scheme is all that stands between him and the life he was supposed to have. That gap between what Randy has and what Randy wants is not a running joke. It is the whole point. Randy Marsh is not a comedy character who happens to do funny things. He is one of the most carefully constructed satires of the American male that television has ever produced. Every scheme, every obsession, every failed business, every moment where he burns his family's stability down to chase something new, all of it is pointing at the same idea. The American dream does not promise you happiness. It promises you that the next thing will deliver it. And Randy believes that promise every single time. To understand why Randy works as a character, you have to start at the beginning. When South Park first aired in 1997, Randy was not the focus of anything. He was Stan's dad. He showed up at the edges of episodes, said something mildly embarrassing, and went back to being background furniture. In the early seasons, he was genuinely calm and level-headed. He gave advice. He behaved like a normal father would. The show was about 4 kids, and the adults existed to react to what the kids were doing. Something changed around season 5 and 6. Trey Parker, who voices Randy and created the show alongside Matt Stone, started getting older. He was moving through his 30s, looking at the adult world differently than he had when the show started. Parker and Stone have both said that as they aged, they found themselves relating more to the adult characters than to the children. The boys were still the boys, but the fathers were becoming more interesting, and no father was more interesting than Randy. Parker has described Randy as the biggest dingbat in the entire show. That description is accurate, but incomplete. Randy is not dumb in the way that someone who failed school is dumb. He has a doctorate. He understands geology well enough that the town calls on him professionally. What Randy lacks is not intelligence. It is the ability to sit still with who he already is. He cannot look at his life and feel that it is enough. There is always something just over the next hill that is going to make everything finally feel right. This is not a personality quirk. It is a very specific American disease. The American dream, in its most basic form, is the idea that any person can work hard, take a chance, and build a better life than the one they started with. It is a genuinely powerful idea. It has driven real achievement and real courage in real people. But the version of the dream that Randy embodies is not the original. It is the corrupted copy. The version that got passed down through decades of advertising, television, self-help culture, and hustle mythology. That version does not say work hard and build something. It says that whoever you are right now is not enough, and that somewhere out there is a version of yourself who is successful, exciting, admired, and free. And all you have to do is find the right angle to become him. Randy has been chasing that version of himself since the show began. He just keeps changing what the angle is. What makes Randy so useful as a character is that the show never lets him be simply stupid. His problem is not that he lacks the ability to succeed. His problem is that he has already succeeded by every reasonable standard, and it has not fixed the hollow feeling that he carries around with him. This was confirmed explicitly by the show itself. It was eventually revealed that Randy's increasingly reckless behavior across the seasons was not because he was foolish or childish by nature. It was because he was deeply unhappy in his marriage, and had been for a long time. Every obsession, every fad, every business venture was a man in pain trying trying to fill a hole that no business venture was ever going to fill. That revelation lands differently when you go back and watch the early Randy episodes knowing it. The man who gets irrationally excited about things, who commits completely to whatever new identity he has decided to adopt, who drags his family along without considering whether they want to come. None of that reads as pure comedy anymore. It reads as desperation wearing comedy's clothes. Sharon, Randy's wife, understood this long before the show said it plainly. In one of the most emotionally raw moments South Park has ever produced, Sharon tells Randy directly that she has watched him do this over and over again. She lists the things he has thrown himself into, the fights at baseball games, the obsession with World of Warcraft, the celebrity chef phase, and she tells him that she is exhausted by it. Not angry, not contemptuous, exhausted. Like someone who has been watching the same cycle play out for so long that she no longer has the energy to be surprised by it. Randy's response is not to argue with her. He tells her he has been unhappy for a long time. She tells him she has too. The scene ends with them separating, their house going up for sale, and Fleetwood Mac's Landslide playing over a montage of a family coming apart. It is one of the saddest things the show has ever done, and it comes in the middle of an episode that was supposed to be a comedy about a middle-aged man trying to fit in with teenagers. That is Randy Marsh. That is the architecture of him. He is built on a real contradiction. A man who has everything the dream promised and cannot explain why it does not feel like enough. The comedy comes from how far he goes trying to solve that feeling. The tragedy comes from the fact that nothing ever does. Now, there is one more thing that makes Randy different from a generic sad dad character, and it is the thing that makes him genuinely great as a piece of satire rather than just a sympathetic figure. Randy does not know he is doing this. He is not aware that what he calls ambition is actually avoidance. He is not secretly wise about his own condition. When he commits to a new scheme, he commits to it completely, with total sincerity, with absolute certainty that this time it is going to work. He bounces around on his massively swollen, self-inflicted cancer like a man who has found the meaning of life. He makes commercials for his cannabis farm in a deep, sincere voice about community and family, while his actual family is falling apart around him. He tells his son to believe in the farm, while his son is writing songs about how much he hates living on the farm. The gap between Randy's self-image and his reality is not something he has any awareness of, and that gap is exactly where the American dream lives. The dream requires you to believe in the story you are telling about yourself. The moment you stop believing it, the whole thing collapses. Randy never stops believing it. He just keeps changing the story. This is why Parker and Matt Stone made the choice they made as the show matured. They could have kept Randy as background furniture. Instead, they pushed him forward, gave him more screen time, built entire season arcs around him, and eventually made him the center of the show's most sustained satirical project. The Tegrity Farm storyline, which ran from season 22 all the way through season 27, is essentially a long-form examination of everything the Randy character had been building towards since the beginning. A man leaves behind the stability he already had to chase something that feels more real, more free, more meaningful, and then slowly becomes exactly the kind of person he was running away from. But before Tegrity Farms, before the cannabis farm, before the long, slow arc toward his own destruction, there were years of smaller schemes. Years of Randy trying on different identities and discarding them when they stopped feeling exciting. Each one funnier than the last. Each one pointing at the same emptiness underneath. The complete record of those schemes is worth laying out in full because the pattern they form is not random. It is the most honest portrait of male restlessness and misplaced ambition that animated television has ever managed to produce. And when you see all of it together, lined up side by side, the joke stops being about Randy and starts being about something much larger. It starts being about the dream itself, and the very specific kind of person the dream is designed to produce. A person who is always almost there. A person who can always explain why the last thing did not work and why this new thing is different. A person who is never satisfied, never still, never done. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. The next section lines every single one of those schemes up and looks at what they add up to. Section 2, the scheme graveyard. Randy's complete business record. Let's do the list. Not a summary, not the highlights. The whole thing laid out in order, because the only way to understand what South Park is doing with Randy Marsh is to see every scheme stacked on top of every other scheme and ask the question the show never asks directly. What kind of person does this? What kind of man keeps starting over, keeps catching fire for something new, keeps dragging his family into the next version of himself every single time without ever stopping to notice the pattern? The answer is not a stupid man. The answer is not even a reckless man exactly. The answer is a man who has confused movement with progress. A man who believes that as long as he is doing something, he is getting somewhere. The American dream runs on that confusion. It always has. So here is Randy Marsh's complete business and scheme record as far as the show gives it to us. Every entry is real, every entry happened on screen, and by the time you get to the end of the list, the joke will have turned into something else entirely. Randy starts out in the earliest seasons as a geologist. That is his job, his identity, the thing that earns his family's house and food and stability. He holds the doctoral degree in geology. The show does not make a joke out of this at first. It is just a fact about who he is. A scientist, a professional, a man with credentials. The first real crack in that image comes when Randy starts inserting himself into situations that have nothing to do with geology. In season 3, the town is dealing with people spontaneously combusting, which is not a geology problem by any definition. Randy decides it is his problem anyway. He investigates, concludes that people are holding in their gas, and recommends that everyone simply start letting it out. The town follows this advice. People start passing gas everywhere, constantly. Randy wins a Nobel Prize for this work. He then loses the Nobel Prize when a better scientist figures out that his solution was causing global warming to accelerate. Randy had solved one problem by creating a catastrophic new one, and collected the highest award in science on the way out. This is the template. It will repeat. Randy gets deeply, irrationally invested in Little League Baseball, not as a coach, not in any official capacity, but as a father in the stands. He does not watch his son play baseball. He trains to fight other fathers in the parking lot. In the episode called The Losing Edge, Randy is not trying to help Stan's team win. He is deliberately trying to get Stan's team to lose, because losing means the season ends and he does not have to keep going to games. Meanwhile, he is picking fights with opposing teams' dads, training like a professional fighter, and treating the parking lot brawls as the real competition. Randy becomes so good at this that his fights become the main event. Stan's baseball games are a side note. Randy has converted his son's sporting season into his own personal fighting career, and he does not see anything strange about this at all. The World of Warcraft phase lands Randy in the hospital. He plays the game so aggressively for so many consecutive hours that his body starts to break down. Sharon mentions this period during her confrontation with him in You're Getting Old. It is on the list of things he has thrown himself into without thinking about what it costs everyone around him. Randy did not play World of Warcraft like a person with a hobby. He played it like a person trying to escape from something, which of course he was. Then comes the celebrity chef phase. Randy develops a deep obsession with cooking shows, specifically a kind of obsession that the show makes very clear goes beyond a normal interest in food. He becomes the school cafeteria chef, takes over the kitchen at South Park Elementary, and begins treating the lunch program like a professional restaurant. His cooking is genuinely good, which almost makes it worse. The scheme works well enough that it has to be dismantled by Sharon addressing the larger problem in their marriage directly. His interest in cooking was not really about cooking. It was about the identity, the image of being someone impressive, someone skilled, someone worth watching. Randy discovers he is secretly Lord. This needs some explanation. The show reveals across several episodes that Randy has been secretly recording and releasing music as the pop star Lord, using voice-altering technology to disguise himself. He does not tell his family. He builds an entire secret career as a female pop musician, performs at major venues, and keeps this going across multiple seasons. When it eventually comes out and he performs live at the Pepsi Center, the whole thing falls apart and Randy becomes disillusioned with the music industry and its use of technology to fake performances. He walks away. The music career ends not because he decides to end it, but because it stops feeling real. The Blockbuster video purchase is one of the most perfectly constructed Randy schemes in the entire show. In season 16, Randy buys a Blockbuster video store. Not a franchise. The show suggests he may have purchased what was left of the entire chain for $10,000. He buys it in 2012, when Blockbuster has already been functionally destroyed by Netflix and streaming services. Everyone who comes into contact with Randy after this purchase tells him the same thing. Nobody rents movies anymore. The technology changed. The business model is dead. Randy refuses to accept this. He genuinely believes that if he can just hold on long enough, customers will come back. They do not come back. The store sits empty. Randy slowly loses his grip on reality, starts seeing ghosts, and begins behaving like the character from The Shining, talking to the empty store, taking direction from a ghost employee who keeps urging him toward violence. His daughter eventually burns the store down. The insurance money goes back to the family. Randy returns to his geology job. The Blockbuster scheme lasted one episode and left $0 zero lasting impact on anything. The Sarcastiball era deserves its own entry. Randy invents a sport called Sarcastiball as a sarcastic protest against new football safety rules. He does not actually want to create a new sport, he is being sarcastic, making a point. Nobody understands that he is being sarcastic. The school adopts Sarcastiball. Randy is made the coach of South Park Elementary's Sarcastiball team. The NFL adopts the sport. Randy becomes the head coach of the Denver Broncos. He becomes so deep inside the sarcasm that he loses the ability to say anything genuine. He is eventually cured by accidentally drinking something he should not have drunk, which snaps him back into sincerity. Randy did not plan to revolutionize American football. He stumbled into it while making a complaint, and the country followed him there. The Black Friday security guard phase shows Randy at his most strategic and his most pointless simultaneously. He takes a job as a mall security guard specifically to get inside access to the Black Friday sales before the crowds arrive. He has no interest in being a security guard. He has no interest in actually working the job. He wants the early deals. He treats the security guard position as an infiltration mission. He works his way up through the security hierarchy, takes on increasing responsibility, and ends up in charge of a situation far larger than he ever intended, all because he wanted to buy something at a discount. By season 16, Randy has also gone through a significant drinking problem arc. After getting pulled over for drunk driving, Randy convinces himself that he has a serious incurable disease. He restricts himself to a wheelchair. He shaves his head. He acts weak. He takes an AA meeting so seriously that he genuinely believes alcoholism is a terminal condition that has removed all personal responsibility from his life. This is, of course, a way to avoid taking personal responsibility for his life. The scheme collapses when a statue of the Virgin Mary is involved in the resolution of his drinking problem. Randy is cured, or decides he is cured, and the whole thing ends. Then comes Tegrity Farms. In season 22, Randy moves his entire family to a cannabis farm in the countryside. He quits his geology job. He uproots Sharon, Stan, and Shelley from their home without a real conversation about whether anyone else wants this. He names the farm Tegrity Farms, Tegrity being his way of saying integrity, and begins making commercials in a deep, slow, sincere voice about community and family and doing things the right way. He takes on a business partner in Towley, a talking towel who loves marijuana. He begins farming cannabis and selling it to the town. Over the following seasons, the Tegrity Farm storyline becomes the most complete version of everything the Randy character had been building toward. He sells his marijuana to China, which requires him to do things that cannot be described as having tegrity in any sense of the word. He engages in increasingly unethical behavior. He becomes violent in defense of his business. He goes to prison. He is released. He vows to stop. He does not stop. He diversifies into plant-based burgers using cannabis as the main ingredient, which leads to him and Towley slaughtering a field of cows with shotguns because the cows were eating his marijuana plants. He tries to stop competitors from growing their own marijuana by lobbying the town council. He hires a black business partner purely as a way to make his brand look better, with no intention of giving that partner any real power in the business. The farm runs from season 22 through season 27. It ends in season 27 when Sharon sells it while Randy is not paying attention. The farm goes for very poor sales prices. Randy's longest, most committed venture ends not with a dramatic failure, not with a moment of reckoning, but with a quiet sale and a closing door. Now stand back from the list. What you are looking at is not a series of random events. It is a record of a man who cannot stop. Geology, fighting, gaming, cooking, music, retail, Sarcastiball, security work, farming, drug dealing, international expansion, imprisonment. Randy has lived more identities than most fictional characters are given in an entire career, and he has approached every single one of them with the same total commitment, the same complete belief that this is the one. This is the thing that is going to make his life feel like it means something. The American dream does not tell you what to want. It tells you to want more, and it tells you that more is always available, always just ahead, always worth the disruption of everything you already have. Randy is not rejecting that message. He is following it perfectly. He is the dream's best student. He just keeps graduating into a new version of the same What the list also shows is the damage. Sharon's exhaustion, which she finally names out loud in in You're Getting Old did not come from nowhere. She watched every single entry on this list happen in real time. She supported the geology career, then watched it get abandoned repeatedly. She worked at the Blockbuster with him. She lived on the farm. She raised 2 children while her husband was cycling through identities at a pace that made stable family life nearly impossible. The cost of the dream is not paid by the person chasing it. It is paid by the people standing closest to them. Stan pays it too. Stan spends significant parts of his childhood embarrassed by, frustrated with, and eventually heartbroken by his father. The farm forces Stan to commute an hour to school every day. The farm takes him away from his friends and his town. Stan writes songs about how much he hates living on the farm. He watches his father choose the business over the family again and again across multiple seasons until their relationship becomes estranged in the imagined future the show eventually depicts. The schemes are funny. They are genuinely, consistently funny. The Blockbuster descent into madness, the bouncing on swollen cancer, the Sarcastaball revolution, the Secret Lord career. South Park is a comedy, and the comedy is real. But The List, taken whole, is not a comedy. The List is a portrait of a man who spent his entire adult life looking for something that was not missing, in places it was never going to be found. The dream told Randy his life could always be more. Randy believed it. The family paid for it. But Randy is not the only one in South Park who follows the dream's logic. There is another character in this show who runs on the exact same engine. The same belief that desire justifies method, that money measures worth, that exploitation is just business with a better name. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. That character is 10 years old, and he has been making the exact same argument as American capitalism for his entire fictional life. Section 3, Tegrity Farms, the American dream with a different name. Randy Marsh has done a lot of things over the course of South Park's run. He has fought strangers in parking lots. He has microwaved parts of his body to get a doctor's note. He has secretly been a pop star. He has bought a dead business and slowly lost his mind inside it. Each of those things lasted an episode, maybe 2, before the show reset and moved on. Tegrity Farms was different. Tegrity Farms ran for 7 seasons. It started in season 22 and did not end until season 27. For 7 years of the show's life, Randy Marsh was a cannabis farmer, and the show used that cannabis farm to say everything it had been building toward about the American dream in one long, sustained, deeply committed piece of storytelling. If the earlier schemes were sketches, Tegrity Farms was the full painting. Everything the show had been quietly arguing about ambition and selfishness and the cost of chasing something you cannot name, all of it found its fullest form on that farm. And it started with Randy standing in his living room telling his family he had enough. The setup for Tegrity Farms arrives in season 22. Randy and Sharon are called into the school counselor's office because their daughter Shelly has been vaping at school and covering it up by sending the recess monitor a photograph of a dog's rear end to distract him. This is, by any reasonable standard, a minor incident. It is embarrassing and strange, but it is not a crisis. A normal parent processes it, has a conversation with their child, and moves on. Randy does not process it. Randy decides it is a symptom of everything wrong with South Park, with modern life, with the world his children are growing up in. He sits in the car on the way home and tells Sharon that he is done. He is done with the town. He is done with what it has become. He wants to go back to something real, something simple, something that has meaning. He wants to live on a farm. He wants to grow things with his hands. He wants his family to have tegrity. Tegrity, Randy's word. His personal version of integrity, pronounced the way someone might say it if they had grown up in a small town and never quite left the accent behind. He says it with total sincerity. He means it completely. In this moment, Randy Marsh genuinely believes that moving his family to a cannabis farm in the Colorado countryside is a moral act. He is not running from something, he is running towards something. He is a man who has identified what is wrong with the world and has decided to fix it by opting out. This is one of the most recognizable moves in the entire American Dream playbook. It is the version where the dream does not look like ambition, it looks like rejection of ambition. It is the story of the person who walks away from the corrupt, hollow, exhausting world of normal life to build something authentic with their own hands. The small farm, the honest product, the real community, the idea that you can find meaning by going back to basics, by simplifying, by returning to the land. Americans have been telling themselves this story since before the country was a country. The farm is not just a business location in South Park. The farm is a myth, and Randy Randy buys into it completely. The family moves. Stan now has to commute an hour to school every day. Shelly is pulled away from whatever life she had in town. Sharon goes along with it because this is what Randy wants, and Sharon has spent a very long time going along with what Randy wants. A montage plays, a song called On a Colorado Farm, showing the Marsh family relocating to a rural property where Randy will grow hemp and cannabis and sell it to the surrounding area. The montage is warm and hopeful. It looks like the beginning of something good. It is not the beginning of something good. The commercials come first. Randy starts making advertisements for Tegrity Farms, and the advertisements are the clearest signal of what the show is actually doing with this storyline. Randy's voice drops about 3 octaves when he records these ads. He speaks slowly, warmly, with long pauses between thoughts, like a man who has all the time in the world because he is living the right way. He talks about community. He talks about family. He talks about sunrises and smiles and doing things the honest way. The commercials are shot to look like the kind of small business advertisement that tries very hard to make you feel something. The acoustic guitar in the background, the wide shots of fields, the sense that this product is not just a product, but a way of life. The gap between what the commercials say and what is actually happening on the farm is where the comedy lives, but it is also where the argument lives. Randy is selling integrity as a brand. He has taken the word tegrity, his made-up word for a real concept, and turned it into a marketing tool. The farm is called Tegrity Farms not because it operates with integrity, but because Randy wants people to associate his product with integrity. From the very beginning, the name is doing the work that the actual business cannot do. The brand is the honesty that the operation itself lacks. This is not a new observation about the cannabis industry specifically. It is an observation about the American small business myth in general. The idea that a small, local, honest producer is automatically more trustworthy, more ethical, more deserving of your money than a large corporation. Randy weaponizes that idea from day one. He positions Tegrity Farms as the alternative to the big, soulless vape companies that are selling poison to children. He is the good version. He has Tegrity. Tally joins the farm as Randy's business partner and weed quality tester. Tally is a talking towel who is addicted to marijuana, which makes him both a good tester and a deeply unreliable business partner. The show uses Tally's presence partly for comedy. A stoned talking towel as your chief operating partner is inherently funny, but also as a quiet commentary on how Randy makes decisions. He is running a business with a towel who loves drugs because the towel showed up and seemed enthusiastic. Randy does not make careful, considered choices about who he brings into his operation. He makes choices based on who is available and who shares his current excitement. For a while, the farm works. People in South Park buy Randy's weed. The business grows. Randy is happy in the way he is always happy at the beginning of a new phase. Completely, totally, with no awareness that this happiness is the same happiness he felt at the beginning of every other phase that eventually fell apart. Then season 23 starts and everything accelerates. The first 6 episodes of season 23 replace the normal South Park opening with a new one, a Tegrity Farms intro sung by Randy promoting the business. This is the show itself drawing attention to how completely the farm has taken over. Randy is no longer a character who has a farm. The farm has become so central to who Randy is that it has replaced the show's own identity for half a season. Parker and Stone are making a meta joke here, but the meta joke has a point. Randy's obsessions do not just take over his family's life, they take over everything around them. Randy decides Tegrity Farms needs to expand into China. This decision is worth sitting with for a moment. Randy has a small cannabis farm in Colorado. Cannabis is illegal in China. Randy does not know this, or if he does, he decides it is not his problem. He boards a plane to China with a significant quantity of marijuana in his luggage, apparently having done no research whatsoever into the laws of the country he is flying into. On the plane, he looks around and realizes that everyone else is also flying to China to expand their business. NBA players, Disney characters, corporate representatives of every kind. Randy gets angry at this. He thinks they have stolen his idea. He is the only person on a plane full of people going to the same place for the same reason who believes he thought of it first. He is arrested at customs. The marijuana is discovered immediately. Randy spends time in a Chinese prison where he witnesses real and serious human rights abuses. Prisoners being beaten, forced labor, execution. He is subjected to re-education. He meets Winnie the Pooh and Piglet in his prison cell, who have been imprisoned because internet jokes comparing the cartoon bear to China's president made the character politically problematic. Randy eventually gets out. He makes a deal. The deal requires him to do something that the show presents without softening or comedy cushioning. Randy lures Winnie the Pooh to a secluded secluded alley with Honey and strangles him to death. Piglet watches. Randy gets his trade deal. Tegrity weed becomes legal in China. A dump truck full of money arrives at the farm. At dinner that night, Stan looks at his father, who is still covered in honey and blood, and quietly asks what happened. Randy confirms what Stan has already figured out. Stan gets up from the table and goes to write a song about his father. He does not cry. He does not yell. He just leaves because there is nothing left to say. This is the moment where the Tegrity Farms arc stops being a satire of the cannabis industry and becomes something larger. Randy did not strangle Winnie the Pooh because he is evil. He did it because the deal was available, and the deal meant money, and the money meant the farm could continue, and the farm continuing meant his dream was still alive. He crossed a line that should have been impossible to cross, and he crossed it smoothly, without drama, because by that point in the arc, the business had become the thing that justified everything else. The farm was not serving Randy's values. Randy's values were serving the farm. That inversion, where the dream stops being a means to a life and becomes the life itself, replacing everything else, is the core of what South Park is saying about the American dream across the entire Tegrity Farm storyline. Randy started the farm because he wanted a better, more honest life. By season 23, the farm is the reason he is in a Chinese prison strangling cartoon characters for trade access. The thing that was supposed to give him integrity has eaten his integrity completely. And Randy cannot see this because Randy never sees the pattern he is inside. The business keeps going wrong in ways that are entirely Randy's fault. He tries to create a plant-based burger using cannabis as the main ingredient, which leads to the farm being overrun by cows that eat his crop. Randy and Towley's solution to the cow problem is to get high and shoot all of the cows with shotguns. This is filmed in a way that is deliberately uncomfortable. Not cartoon violence, but something closer to real, ugly carnage. Because the show wants you to feel the distance between the man who made those warm, sincere commercials about community and sunrises, and the man who is now slaughtering livestock in a field while stoned. Randy lobbies the South Park City Council to prevent people from growing their own marijuana at home. This is the detail that makes the Tegrity joke fully land. The man who built a brand on independence and authenticity and doing things the right way, the man who left town because it had become too corporate and hollow, is now using local government to protect his market share by making competition harder. He is doing exactly what large corporations do. He has become exactly what he left town to escape. And he does this without any awareness that it is happening. The show does not point at this with a flashing sign. It just shows it happening and lets the audience sit with it. Randy eventually goes to prison within the show's own timeline for the increasingly unethical practices he engages in across season 23. He is released. He promises to stop. He does not stop. The farm continues. Multiple times across the later seasons, the show builds toward what looks like a genuine ending. Randy returning to his old self, going back to his geology job, reconnecting with his family. In South Park: The Streaming Wars, Randy does briefly return to geology. He helps solve a drought in Colorado by building something that extracts water from a specific source. He seems, for a moment, like the person he used to be. Then he goes back to the farm. The farm finally ends in season 27. In an episode called Sycophancy, Sharon sells it. The sale price is low. The business that Randy poured 7 years of his life into, that he moved his family for, that he went to prison for, that he strangled Winnie the Pooh for, closes quietly with a transaction that barely registers. The farm is sold to an unknown buyer. Randy loses his business not through a dramatic reckoning or a final confrontation with his own failures, but through poor sales and a spouse who has simply had enough. The show imagines a future timeline in which Randy is old and living in a retirement home. In that future, he still thinks of the farm as the peak of his life. He still values it above his family. He still blames Stan for the farm's end. In old age, Randy has not learned anything. He has not arrived at wisdom or peace or acceptance. He has arrived at an old man's version of the same story he was telling himself when he was a middle-aged man loading his family into a car to drive to a cannabis field in the Colorado countryside. The story where he almost made it. The story where it would have worked if the circumstances had been different. The story where the dream was real and he was just one more step away from living inside it. That is what Tegrity Farms actually is. Not a cannabis story storyline, not a Colorado joke, not even primarily a satire of the weed industry, though it is that too. It is the fullest picture South Park ever drew of what happens when a person commits completely to the dream's logic, when they follow it all the way down, past the point where any reasonable person would stop, past the damage to their family and their relationships and their actual values, all the way to the quiet, unremarkable end. The name was always the joke. Integrity. Integrity with the shape worn off. The Dream, with a different spelling. But here's the thing about The Dream that the Tegrity Farms arc sets up without quite completing. Randy chose this. He made the decision, got on the tractor, made the commercials, went to China. His failures were his own. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. The episode that comes next in this essay is about a time when the show strips all of that choice away. When it looks at what the dream costs, not through comedy, but through something much closer to grief. It is the episode where South Park stops being sarcastic for just long enough to tell the truth about Randy directly. And the truth lands like a door closing on a house you grew up in. Section 4. You're Getting Old. The show tells the truth about Randy. Most South Park episodes end where they started. That is one of the show's defining features. The chaos arrives, escalates to a point that should be impossible to recover from, and then resets. Characters return to their default positions. The town forgets what happened. Everyone wakes up the next week in roughly the same condition they were in before. Parker and Stone built the show this way deliberately, and for most of its run, that reset button is part of the joke. The world keeps breaking and the world keeps getting put back together, and nothing learned carries over to the next story. Season 15, episode 7, called You're Getting Old, does not do this. It does not reset. It does not put things back together by the end. It ends with a family separated, a house sold, a kid sitting alone, and Fleetwood Mac's Landslide playing over a montage that feels less like a television show and more like a memory of something you lost. The episode aired in June 2011 and landed so hard on its audience that a significant number of viewers genuinely believed Parker and Stone were ending the show. It felt like a farewell. It felt like the writers had decided after 15 seasons to finally say what they had been circling around for years. They were not ending the show, but they were saying something real, and what they were saying was about Randy. The episode begins at Stan's 10th birthday party. Kyle gives Stan a CD from a music genre called tween wave, a type of music that the show invents for this episode, described as a mix of tween pop and heavy metal, and represented on screen as the sound of drum beats and people passing gas. The adults hear it and react to it the way adults always react to music their kids like, with contempt, with the confident belief that real music sounded different when they were young. Sharon immediately takes the CD away from Stan. Randy, however, defends it. He sits down and listens to it. He decides it is interesting. He wants to understand what the younger generation is connecting to. On the surface, this looks like another Randy scheme beginning. He's going to adopt a new identity, get too deep into it, and cause problems. This is the pattern. The audience knows the pattern. The episode appears to be setting that pattern up again. But something is different this time, and the difference shows up in Stan before it shows up in Randy. Stan listens to the tween wave music, and it sounds like something else to him. It sounds like feces. Not metaphorically, literally, visually, actually like feces. He goes to the doctor, and the doctor examines him and tells him he has become a cynical person. The condition is described as natural, something that happens to people as they get older, and their ability to find things genuinely exciting starts to fade. The doctor says it will likely pass, but warns that in the meantime, it is going to be hard to be around. The cynicism spreads. Stan starts seeing and hearing everything as terrible. Movies sound awful. Food tastes wrong. Music he used to love sounds like what the tween wave sounds like to everyone else. Kyle, Cartman, and Kenny get tired of being around Stan's constant negativity. They start avoiding him. They lie to him about being sick so they do not have to include him in things. When Stan catches them at the movies without him and confronts Kyle, Stan literally sees Kyle as a large pile of feces talking to him. He walks away. The friendship for the time being is over. This is an 11-year-old kid experiencing something that most people do not put language to until they are much older. It is the feeling that the world has stopped being interesting, that the things you used to love do not deliver what they used to deliver, that getting excited about something requires effort that it did not used to require. The show calls it cynicism. In real life, it has other names, some of them medical, some of them just the word tired. Parker and Stone confirmed in commentary for this episode that Stan's arc was drawn directly from their own experience. They were in their early 40s when they wrote it. They were feeling what Stan was feeling, the creative exhaustion of people who have been doing the same thing for a long time and are starting to wonder if they still mean it. Stan's 10th birthday was Parker and Stone's way of putting their own midlife feeling into a character who could carry it without it becoming self-indulgent. The episode episode is about Stan, but it is also about the people who made it. And running alongside Stan's story, in the way that the show always runs a parent story alongside a child story, is Randy. Randy has decided to become a tween wave musician. He forms a band. He gives himself the stage name Steamy Ray Vaughan. He starts performing at the local bowling alley. He wears the clothes of the genre, adopts the mannerisms, commits to the identity with the same total sincerity he brings to every new phase of his life. Sharon watches this happen and does not find it funny. She has watched too many phases to find this one funny. She tells Randy that what he is doing is not really about tween wave music. She tells him he is feigning interest in something from the younger generation because he cannot accept that he is getting older. She tells him the whole thing is rooted in his fear of aging, in his refusal to admit that the version of himself who was young and exciting and full of possibility is not the version of himself that exists anymore. Randy pushes back. He insists that Sharon dismisses everything from younger generations, that she is the closed-minded one, that he is just trying to stay connected. Sharon catches Randy performing at the bowling alley. She comes in and sees him on stage with another performer doing the tween wave act, and something in her that has been held back for a very long time comes out. What follows is the conversation that the entire Randy Marsh character had been building toward for 15 seasons without the show ever quite arriving at it. Sharon does not yell at Randy about tween wave. She yells at Randy about everything. She names the schemes. She names the phases, the baseball fights, the World of Warcraft, the cooking obsession. She lays them out in order, one after another, and she asks him directly, why does he keep doing this? Why does he keep latching onto things and going completely overboard and dragging everyone around him into it and then dropping it and finding the next thing? Randy goes quiet, and then Randy says something that the show had never let him say before. He says he has been unhappy for a long time. Not unhappy about tween wave, not unhappy about any specific thing, just unhappy for a long time. And Sharon says she has been too. They look at each other and there is no joke. There is no cutaway to something absurd that breaks the tension. The show just holds the moment. Two people who have been performing happiness in the same house for years are finally admitting to each other that the performance has been exhausting both of them. Sharon says their life feels like the same ridiculous thing happening every week. She says she cannot fake it anymore. This line has a second layer that the audience would have caught immediately. Sharon is also describing South Park, the television show, the reset button, the way the same chaos cycles back every episode without anything changing. The show is briefly acknowledging its own structure through Sharon's exhaustion, but the layer underneath that meta joke is not a joke at all. Sharon is a woman who has stayed in a relationship with a man who keeps choosing his next obsession over his actual life, and she has run out of the energy to keep pretending that is fine. They separate. Randy moves out. Sharon, Stan, and Shelley move into a new house. The old family home goes up for sale. Landslide plays. The choice of Landslide is worth thinking about. The song is about looking at the life you have built and asking whether you can handle the changes that are coming, whether the things you have constructed around yourself are solid or whether they are about to shift. Stevie Nicks wrote it when she was in her mid-20s and uncertain about everything. It became a song that people return to at every age because the feeling it describes, that moment when you look honestly at your life and feel the ground move under you, does not belong to any one decade. Parker and Stone chose it for this moment because it is the song you play when the truth has finally been said out loud and there is no taking it back. Stan watches his parents' marriage end and his friendships collapse in the same episode. He is 10 years old and he is watching the two structures that children depend on most, family and friends, both fall apart at the same time. And unlike in a normal South Park episode, neither of these things gets fixed by the end. The credits roll on a kid sitting alone, still cynical, still unable to find anything good in the world, in a new house without his father. The next episode, called Asperger's, picks up where You're Getting Old left off. Stan is still cynical. He discovers that drinking alcohol numbs the condition. For the first time in a long while, when he drinks, everything stops looking like feces and starts looking normal. This is the show very quietly and very directly making an argument about why people drink, not as a comedy beat, as an observation about what alcohol actually does for certain people in certain kinds of pain. Stan finds relief in it. The relief is real. The method is not okay. Meanwhile, Randy and Sharon reconcile in Asperger's. Randy comes back. The old house is unsold. The family reassembles. Landslide plays again over the reconciliation, frustration, and this time it sounds different. Not like grief, but like the stubborn, slightly defeated decision to keep going anyway. But here is where the show does something quietly devastating. Stan has spent Asperger's going through his own arc, arriving at a kind of hard-won acceptance. He has worked through the cynicism enough to find a way to live with it. He has gotten to a place where he can see a future, and just as he reaches that place, Randy shows up to tell him everything is fine now. Everything is back to normal. Mom and Dad are back together. Stan does not look relieved. He looks like someone who just watched a door close on the one moment where change was actually possible. The show ends with Stan still depressed, still quietly struggling, now also drinking to manage it. The reset button has been pressed, but this time, pressing it does not restore anything. It just covers the damage over. You're Getting Old and Asperger's together formed the emotional center of everything South Park ever said about the American dream and what it does to families. The dream, in Randy's version of it, requires constant forward motion, constant reinvention, constant commitment to the next thing. What that constant motion costs the people in its path is exactly what these two episodes are about. Sharon's exhaustion, Stan's instability, the marriage that keeps almost ending, the family that keeps almost falling apart. The reason these episodes hit so hard is that they are not satirizing anything. There is no corporate target, no political figure, no cultural trend being mocked. It is just two people in a kitchen admitting they are unhappy, and a kid in a new house watching his parents' world split open, and a song playing over all of it that has nothing ironic in it at all. Parker and Stone wrote the confrontation scene between Randy and Sharon less than 48 hours before the episode aired. It was one of the last things completed. Parker described it as almost an afterthought, something that grew out of the episode's story almost by accident, not planned as the centerpiece it became. The fact that the most emotionally honest moment in the show's entire run was written in 2 days and treated as a secondary concern says something about how this show works. The truth comes out sideways in South Park. It always has. The jokes are the front door. The real argument is always coming in through a window somewhere. What these episodes confirm about Randy, definitively with no comedy to cushion it, is that his restlessness is not charm and it is not ambition. It is pain. It is the behavior of a man who does not know how to be still with who he is, and whose way of dealing with that inability is to keep moving fast enough that the feeling cannot catch him. The dream gives him permission to do this. The dream calls it ambition. The dream says the man who keeps starting over is the man who refuses to give up. Sharon calls it something else. She calls it the same ridiculous thing happening every week, and for once, the show does not argue with her. What comes next is the other side of this story. Because the dream does not just affect the people chasing it, it affects the people watching them, the ones who inherit the logic without inheriting the house and the wife and the geology degree, the ones who get the hunger without any of the stability to cushion its consequences. The next section is about a business plan with a missing middle, and what that missing middle actually means. Section 5, The Underpants Gnomes, The Dream Without a Middle. Season 2, Episode 17, Gnomes, aired December 16th, 1998. South Park has made sharper episodes. It has made funnier episodes. It has made episodes that hit harder emotionally, and episodes that caused more controversy, and episodes that got more attention from critics and journalists and the kind of people who write long essays about what cartoons mean. But in terms of a single image that captures everything the show believes about money and ambition, and the gap between wanting something and knowing how to get it, nothing in the show's entire run beats the Underpants Gnomes business plan. Phase 1, collect underpants. Phase 2, question mark. Phase 3, profit. 3 steps, 2 of them filled in, 1 of them a complete blank. And the gnomes who drew up this plan are not embarrassed by the blank. They are not worried about it. They have written it on a board and presented it with full confidence, as though the question mark is a minor detail that will sort itself out once the underpants collection is going well enough. This is the American dream drawn as a diagram. The episode builds its story carefully before it gets to the gnomes. Mr. Garrison's job is in danger because he has not been teaching the class anything useful. To save his position, he assigns the students an oral presentation on a current event for the town committee. The boys are grouped with a kid named Tweak, a jittery, anxious child whose family runs a small coffee shop in South Park. Tweak suggests they do their presentation on the underpants gnomes, tiny creatures he has seen sneaking into his bedroom at night and stealing his underwear. Nobody believes Tweak about this. The gnomes are real, but adults dismiss the idea, which is standard operating procedure in South Park. The children see the truth, and the adults argue about things that are not actually happening. While all of this is going on, a larger conflict is developing exploding in the town. A national coffee chain called Starbucks is moving into South Park and threatening to put Tweek's family's small coffee shop out of business. Tweek's father pulls the boys aside and gives them a speech about the evils of large corporations. He tells them that big companies care only about money, that they crush the small business owners who are the real heart of the community, that Starbucks is a threat to everything South Park stands for. He is passionate, he is convincing, he has the boys eating out of his hand. The boys take this message to heart. Their presentation to the town committee is built entirely around Tweek's father's talking points. They argue against Starbucks with real conviction. The town is moved. The mayor agrees to put the question of whether Starbucks can stay in South Park to a public vote. The movement to protect the local coffee shop gains momentum. Everything is going in the right direction for Tweek's family. And then the boys stay up all night to finish their presentation, and the gnomes finally appear. The gnomes come out in the dark, small and efficient, moving through the house with purpose. They go straight to the dresser, collect the underpants, and head back to wherever they came from. The boys follow them. They end up in a massive underground cave filled floor to ceiling with underpants. An enormous stockpile. Years of collection. Organized and cataloged with serious attention to detail. The gnomes are proud of this. They have been building this collection for a very long time. Stan asks them what the underpants are for. The gnomes show him the business plan. Phase 1 is complete. They have the underpants. Phase 3 is the goal. Profit, wealth, success. Phase 2 is the question mark. Stan asks what Phase 2 is. The gnomes explain, patiently and without any apparent embarrassment, that they do not know what Phase 2 is yet. They are still working on that part, but Phase 1 is going very well, and they are confident that Phase 2 will become clear in time. This is where the episode becomes something more than a story about underpants and small business. The gnomes are not stupid. They are organized, dedicated, hardworking. They have committed enormous resources to Phase 1. The cave full of underpants is not the work of lazy creatures. Collecting that much underwear from that many people over that many years requires serious, sustained effort. These are not animals who do not understand the concept of planning. These are creatures who have planned Phase 1 and Phase 3 in great detail and simply decided that Phase 2 will take care of itself. This is what makes them a perfect picture of a certain kind of American ambition. The desire is clear. The outcome is imagined in vivid detail. Profit, success, the reward at the end. The process of actually getting from desire to outcome is left as a question mark to be answered later. Not because the planners are careless, but because sitting with the question mark is uncomfortable and moving forward feels better. Phase 1 is exciting. Phase 1 is action. Phase 1 is doing something. The question mark is just thinking, and thinking does not feel like progress. Randy Marsh has been running the Gnomes business plan his entire life. Every scheme in his history follows the same structure. Phase 1 is always clearly defined. Buy the blockbuster, start the farm, get the medical marijuana card, become a tween wave musician. Phase 3 is always vaguely imagined. Success, happiness, the feeling that his life finally means something. Phase 2 is always the question mark. The actual process by which the thing he starts becomes the thing he wants to have. The boring, difficult, unglamorous work of figuring out whether the idea can actually function in the real world before committing to it completely. The gnomes never figure out Phase 2. Neither does Randy. The difference is that the gnomes are at peace with this. Randy never is. Now, the episode does something at this point that most discussions of it skip over, and skipping it misses the most important part of what the episode is actually arguing. After the boys spend the night with the gnomes, they have to go back to their presentation. They had been planning to argue against Starbucks based on Tweek's father's talking points, but now, having thought about the Underpants Gnomes business plan, they start looking at the actual situation differently. They realize something about Tweek's father. He has been using them. His passionate speech about corporations and community and the importance of small business was not purely principled. It was a business owner protecting his market share. He knows that the Starbucks coffee is probably better than his coffee. He knows that in a fair competition he might lose. So he has recruited a group of children to make an emotional argument on his behalf to the town committee, using their youth and their apparent sincerity to generate goodwill that he cannot generate on his own. The boys' second presentation to the town says this directly. They stand up in front of the committee and explain that corporations are not automatically evil just because they are large, and that small businesses are not automatically good just because they are small. Both types of business are driven by the same thing, the desire to make money. The difference in size does not change the underlying motivation. What matters is whether the product is good and whether the customer is being served well. Everyone tries Starbucks coffee. It is better than Tweek's coffee. The whole town agrees, including Tweek's father himself, who accepts an offer to run the Starbucks location in South Park. The anti-corporate crusade made evaporates the moment people are given the actual product to evaluate. A literary critic and economic theorist named Paul Cantor, who taught college courses using this episode as the main text, described Gnomes as the most fully developed defense of capitalism that the show ever produced. His reading was that the episode challenges the assumption that small businesses are inherently more ethical or more deserving than large corporations, and that Parker and Stone were making an argument for letting markets work without the kind of emotional thinking that Tweek's father was trying to insert into the conversation. This reading is accurate, but it is incomplete, because the gnomes are still there. The gnomes do not disappear from the episode once Kyle makes his speech about corporations. The gnomes keep collecting underpants at the end of the episode. Their question mark is still a question mark. They have not figured out phase 2. The cave of underpants keeps growing. Parker and Stone do not resolve the gnome story. They leave it running underneath everything else. An endless loop of collecting without converting, of effort without outcome, of phase 1 going brilliantly while phase 3 remains a distant dream that the question mark in the middle makes unreachable. The gnomes are not just a joke about bad business planning. They are not just a visual gag about tiny creatures with an ambitious but incomplete spreadsheet. They are the show's image for a specific kind of American delusion. The belief that if you work hard enough at the beginning and want the outcome badly enough at the end, the middle will somehow handle itself. That enough passion and enough effort will eventually bridge the gap between what you have collected and what you want to have. This belief is everywhere in American culture. It is in every motivational speech that tells you to focus on the vision and trust the process without ever describing what the process actually is. It is in every startup that raises money on the strength of phase 1 enthusiasm and phase 3 projections and a phase 2 that consists entirely of optimism. It is in every person who has ever started something with complete confidence and discovered, somewhere in the middle, that the confidence was not the same thing as a plan. Randy buys the Blockbuster. Phase 1, purchase completed. Phase 3, successful video rental business. Phase 2, figure out how to make people want to rent physical videos in 2012. He never gets to phase 2. The store sits empty. He descends into The Shining. Randy moves to the farm. Phase 1, acquire land, plant cannabis, make commercials. Phase 3, successful farm business with integrity, meaning, and a life that feels real. Phase 2, the actual sustained work of running an ethical, functional business without cutting moral corners or making deals with authoritarian governments or slaughtering cows in a field with a stoned talking towel. He never gets to phase 2. The farm fills the question mark with increasingly bad decisions until Sharon sells it. The gnomes keep collecting, the cave keeps filling. Phase 2 stays blank. What makes the gnomes episode land differently, depending on how old you are when you watch it, is that the joke requires a certain amount of life experience to fully sting. At 10 years old, the underpants gnomes are funny because tiny creatures stealing underpants is funny. At 35, the underpants gnomes are funny because you have met the underpants gnomes. You have worked for them. You may have been them. You have sat in meetings where phase 1 was described in enormous detail and phase 3 was projected on a screen in large numbers and phase 2 was summarized in a phrase like, and then we scale, or and then growth happens, and everyone in the room nodded along because the question mark is embarrassing to point at directly. South Park aired Gnomes in 1998, which was the exact moment when the internet economy was building toward the dot-com bubble, a period in which an enormous number of businesses were being funded on phase 1 enthusiasm and phase 3 projections with question marks, where the actual revenue model was supposed to be. Companies were raising millions of dollars on the basis of user numbers and eyeballs and potential without a coherent answer to the question of how the users and eyeballs were going to produce money. The bubble burst in 2000. A huge number of phase 1 and phase 3 businesses discovered that the question mark had not filled itself in. Parker and Stone may or may not have been consciously targeting the dot-com economy when they wrote Gnomes. What they definitely were targeting was the broader American faith in ambition as a substitute for planning. The idea that wanting something badly enough and working hard enough in the early stages creates a kind of moral entitlement to the outcome. The gnomes have earned their profit. They have put in the hours. They have the cave full of underpants to prove it. The fact that nobody wants to buy underpants from them and that they have no system for converting underpants into money is a technicality that their effort should be able to overcome. It cannot. Effort does not override the question mark. Passion does not fill in phase 2. The dream that tells you to want it badly and work hard and trust that the middle will take care care of itself is not a plan. It is a story. A very appealing story. A story that has driven real people to real achievements, but a story that collapses the moment you ask it to function as an actual sequence of events in the real world. The Gnomes have the most honest business plan in South Park's history, because at least they wrote the question mark down. At least they acknowledged that something is supposed to go there. Most of the Dreams promoters do not even do that much. They skip Phase 2 entirely and present Phase 1 and Phase 3 as though the distance between them is just a matter of time and determination. Randy never wrote his question mark down. He never acknowledged the gap. He just kept buying things and starting things and moving the family to new places with the absolute certainty that Phase 3 was waiting for him at the end of it all. The Gnomes are still in that cave. The underpants are still being collected. The plan is still missing its middle. But the Gnomes at least have the excuse of being tiny mythical creatures who emerged from a child's imagination. The next character we need to talk about has no such excuse. He is 10 years old, he attends South Park Elementary, and he has understood since he was a child that the question mark is where the real money is. Not in filling it in, but in finding someone else to fill it in for you while you take the profit. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. His name is Eric Cartman, and he did not miss Phase 2. He just decided other people could do it for him. Section 6, Cartman the Capitalist. Child entrepreneur as systemic critique. Eric Cartman is 8 years old when South Park begins. He is 9 for most of the show's middle run. He is 10 for what feels like the majority of human history. He has never aged, never graduated, never moved on. He is permanently, stubbornly, cosmically 10 years old. And in those 10 years, he has run more businesses, executed more schemes, manipulated more people for financial gain, and demonstrated a more thorough understanding of how money actually moves in America than most adult characters in the history of television. This is not an accident. Parker and Stone did not make Cartman a junior capitalist because they needed a funny gag about a fat kid who likes money. They made Cartman a junior capitalist because putting the logic of American business inside a 10-year-old boy is the most efficient way to show that logic for exactly what it is. When a grown adult in a suit talks about leveraging assets and maximizing returns and finding efficiencies in the labor pipeline, the language does a certain amount of work to make the behavior sound reasonable. When Cartman says the same things in a child's voice, wearing a child's clothes, in a child's bedroom, the language stops working. The behavior is exposed. You can see exactly what it is because the costume has been removed. Cartman is not a bad person doing bad things inside a good system. Cartman is the system, rendered as a child walking around South Park making the system's arguments with the system's logic and the system's complete lack of shame. His history of enterprises begins early and runs long. In season 1, Cartman convinces the other boys to help him start a boy band. The episode is called Something You Can Do With Your Finger. Cartman forms a group called Finger Bang and books them a performance at the local mall. He handles the business side, takes the largest share of any money to be made, and frames the entire project as an opportunity for everyone while engineering it so that the opportunity benefits him most. This is the template. It will repeat across every business Cartman ever runs. The opportunity is real enough to get other people invested. The structure of the deal ensures Cartman comes out ahead regardless of what happens to everyone else. The lemonade stand phase, the hair extensions business, the online gaming operation, Cartman moves through small enterprises throughout the early seasons with the easy confidence of someone who has internalized a simple rule. Find something people want, position yourself between them and the thing they want, and collect the difference. He does not produce things. He does not build things. He identifies desires and inserts himself into the space between the desire and its satisfaction, then charges for the insertion. In season 6, Cartman creates a theme park called Cartman Land with the $1 million he inherits from his grandmother. He buys an actual amusement park and declares that only he is allowed to use it. The entire joke is that he bought a park so that he would never have to wait in line or share it with other people. When the park starts losing money, he is forced to let other people in and charge them admission. He becomes furious that having customers is the price of keeping the business running. He sells the park and ends up with slightly less money than he started with, having spent an enormous amount of effort and resources to prove that the experience of a private park was not actually worth what he paid for it. This is Cartman running a business the way a child understands business, with the assumption that the point of ownership is personal enjoyment rather than productive operation. The park exists to serve Cartman. When it stops serving Cartman and starts demanding things from him, he walks away. The business is supposed to be a tool for his pleasure. The moment it becomes work, it loses its appeal. The Christian rock phase in season 7 is one of the most efficient satires of the music industry the show ever ever produced. Cartman bets Kyle that he can get a platinum album before Kyle's band does. Cartman forms a Christian rock band called Faith Plus One with Token and Butters. He takes every rock song he knows and replaces secular romantic language with religious language, producing a series of songs about Jesus that are structurally identical to love songs. The band becomes hugely successful. Christian audiences connect with the music deeply and sincerely. Cartman does not feel anything about Jesus or faith or religion. He feels things about winning the bet with Kyle and receiving money. The scheme works perfectly until Cartman discovers that Christian music operates under a different certification system than mainstream music, and the Christian equivalent of a platinum album is a myrrh record, which is not what he bet Kyle he would get. He loses the bet on a technicality. He goes into a rage so complete and so sustained that it becomes one of his defining moments. He is not angry because his music was fraudulent. He is angry because the rules of the system did not deliver what he expected. The music was always a vehicle. The vehicle performed exactly as designed. The road had a different name than the map said it would. In season 8, Cartman starts a NAMBLA recruitment scheme that goes very wrong for reasons that cannot be described here in simple words. The important detail for this essay is the structure of the operation. Cartman identified a group with money and a need, positioned himself as someone who could serve that need, and began collecting fees before fully understanding what the need actually was. He was running phase 1 with a very unclear phase 2 and a phase 3 that he assumed would take care of itself. It did not take care of itself. Things went poorly. Cartman claimed to have learned nothing. The Cartman burger phase shows him at his most ruthlessly efficient. When the boys start a small burger stand, Cartman handles every aspect of the business operation with a level of attention to detail and a willingness to cut costs that leaves the other boys uncomfortable. He has an instinctive grasp of what customers want versus what they need, how much you can charge for the gap between the two, and how little you need to spend on the product itself before the quality drops below the threshold that customers will notice. He is not making burgers. He is managing perceptions of burgers while spending as little as possible on actual ingredients. But none of these earlier enterprises prepare you for the Crack Baby Athletic Association. Season 15, Episode 5. This is where Cartman stops being a child running funny schemes and becomes the show's clearest, most direct argument about the relationship between capitalism, exploitation, and the systems that make exploitation legal. The setup is this. Kyle sees a commercial for crack babies, infants born addicted to crack cocaine because their mothers used the drug while pregnant. The commercial is designed to make viewers feel terrible and donate money. Kyle, being Kyle, decides to go to the hospital and volunteer to help. He follows Cartman there, suspicious, and discovers that Cartman has already been to the hospital and has organized something completely different. Cartman has formed the Crack Baby Athletic Association. He has taken crack-addicted babies and set them up to compete against each other for a small ball filled with crack. The babies crawl toward the ball desperately. The competition is filmed. The footage is posted online. People watch it. Money comes in through advertising. The enterprise is, by the metrics Cartman cares about, a success. Kyle is horrified. He confronts Cartman. Cartman responds by offering Kyle a job as the organization's accountant, pointing out how much money the operation has already made and how quickly it is growing. Kyle refuses. Then Cartman shows Kyle the actual numbers. Kyle looks at the numbers. Kyle takes the job. This is the part of the episode that is not really about crack babies or Cartman or even Kyle specifically. This is the part that is about how systems absorb people who start out opposed to them. Kyle does not become a supporter of exploiting crack babies because he stopped caring about crack babies. He becomes a supporter because the money is real and the operation is already running, and his participation allows him to tell himself he is making it slightly better from the inside. He negotiates a deal where 30% of the revenue goes toward building an orphanage for the babies. Cartman agrees because good PR is valuable. Kyle tells himself he has improved the situation. Stan watches all of this happen and says nothing out loud, but his silence is its own commentary. Kyle starts sounding like Cartman. He knows he is starting to sound like Cartman. At one point, defending the operation to Stan, Kyle makes an argument that is structurally identical to every argument Cartman has ever made about why his current scheme is actually fine. Stan points this out. Kyle argues back and then catches himself mid-sentence and covers his mouth in horror because he has just finished a sentence that Cartman could have said word for word. The show is not making a subtle point here. It is saying directly that the logic of exploitation is contagious, that once you are inside a system that runs on that logic, the system starts shaping your arguments for you. Kyle went in planning to make the operation more ethical. The operation made Kyle more compatible with the operation. Cartman takes a trip trip to the University of Colorado to research how the school's athletic program handles its student athletes. He dresses as a southern plantation owner from before the Civil War. The costume is deliberate and specific. The show is not being subtle about what it is comparing to what. He sits down with the dean and talks about his workers in language that maps exactly onto the language used to justify slavery, then switches to the language used to justify the NCAA's amateur athletics rules, then back again, pointing out that the two languages are describing the same arrangement. The dean throws him out. Cartman is not wrong about the NCAA. That is the uncomfortable part of this scene. His argument that the NCAA profits enormously from athletes who receive no direct payment, that the system is designed to extract labor from people while denying them the money their labor generates, is an accurate description of how the NCAA operated. The show is not endorsing Cartman. It is pointing out that the system Cartman is mimicking exists in real life, is defended by real institutions, and is called something other than what it is. The deal with EA Sports is the episode's final turn. Cartman and Kyle negotiate a deal to license the Crack Baby Athletic Association to EA Sports for a video game. They sign the contract. EA Sports informs them that by signing the contract, the company now owns the rights to the Crack Baby Athletic Association and will keep all profits going forward. The boys receive nothing. The organization they built, the operation they ran, the goodwill they generated, all of it now belongs to a larger corporation that used the contract to absorb everything they had built and cut them out entirely. Cartman is outraged. Kyle is devastated because the orphanage he was going to build with the profits is now not going to be built, and the show makes sure you notice what has happened. The thing that was done to Cartman and Kyle by EA Sports is structurally identical to what Cartman and Kyle were doing to the Crack Babies. A larger entity with more power used the rules of the system to take everything from a smaller entity with less power, called it a legitimate business transaction, and walked away with the money. Cartman got out-Cartmaned. The system that he was operating inside of operated on him the same way he was operating on everyone below him. The orphanage gets built anyway, mysteriously, at the end of the episode. The show provides a supernatural explanation for this that involves the guitarist Slash possibly being a real mythological figure. The orphanage gets built, and Kyle's faith in something is restored. But the Crack Baby Athletic Association is gone. EA Sports has it. The babies are still crack babies. The system is still running. What Cartman represents across all of these enterprises is not simply greed. Greed is too simple a word for what the show is doing with him. Cartman represents the complete internalization of the American economic value system by someone young enough and honest enough to not know he is supposed to hide it. He wants money. He identifies opportunities to make money. He uses other people to make the money. He calls this business. He is not wrong to call it business. This is what business is, stripped of the language that makes it sound more noble than it is. The American dream tells people that success is available to anyone with enough drive and enough cleverness. Cartman has enormous drive and enormous cleverness. The dream does not specify that the drive and cleverness have to be directed toward things that help people. It just says that the outcome, the profit at phase 3, is the measure of whether the plan worked. By that measure, Cartman is frequently successful. His schemes generate real money. His operations function. He gets the phase 3 outcome more reliably than most of the adult characters in the show, including Randy. The difference between Cartman and the dream's official story is that Cartman does not bother to tell the story about why what he is doing is good for everyone. He occasionally invents the story when it is useful, the non-profit framing of the Crack Baby Athletic Association, the charitable orphanage angle, but he does not believe the story, and he does not expect anyone else to believe it either. He operates on the understanding that the story is a tool, not a truth. The dream requires you to believe the story. It requires you to tell yourself and everyone around you that what you are doing is building something, contributing something, making something better. Randy believes his stories completely. The integrity, the farm as a return to real values. He needs the story because without it, the scheme is just a scheme and the hole inside him stays empty. Cartman does not need the story. He is 10 years old and he already understands that the story is the product, not the point. That combination, Randy's desperate belief in his own narrative and Cartman's ruthless clarity about what the narrative is actually for, is how South Park covers both ends of the American dream psychology, the true believer and the operator, the man who needs the dream to mean something and the boy who knows it does not have to mean anything as long as it pays. But neither Randy nor Cartman ever has to confront something that the next section puts directly in front of the audience, because both of them are operating on their own terms, chasing things they chose to chase, building and destroying things they built themselves. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. The next section is about what happens when the dream comes to you uninvited, when it shows up at your neighborhood and builds itself around your house, and uses your poverty as a decoration, and calls the whole thing progress. Section 7. Sodo Sopa, Gentrification and the American Dream Sold Back to the Poor. Season 19, Episode 3. The City Part of Town. Aired September 30th, 2015. There is a version of the American Dream that does not look like Randy Marsh bouncing around on a wheelbarrow, or Cartman dressed as a plantation owner negotiating with a university dean. It does not announce itself loudly. It does not arrive with obvious greed or naked ambition. It arrives quietly, with good lighting and a soft voice, and a commercial that makes you feel like something beautiful is happening. It arrives as a neighborhood. South Park Season 19 is the show at its most structurally ambitious. For the first time in a long time, the season tells one continuous story across all its episodes, rather than resetting each week. The story it tells is about a town trying very hard to appear to be something it is not, and what that effort costs the people who were already there before the appearance became more important than the reality. The city part of town is the third episode of that season, and it is the one where the show makes its clearest argument about gentrification, which is the process of taking a poor neighborhood and making it expensive, typically while telling everyone involved that you are doing something generous and community-minded. The argument the show makes is not subtle. It is not buried under layers of comedy that you have to dig through to find. The argument is right on the surface, delivered through a series of commercials that are so precisely constructed that real journalists covering real gentrification cited the episode when describing what was happening in their own cities in 2015. The setup is this. Mr. Garrison, who in season 19 is running a campaign for president on a platform of extreme anti-immigration, has said things during his campaign that have made South Park look bad nationally. Jimmy Fallon makes fun of the town on The Tonight Show, calling it a backwards, predominantly white town full of people who hold ignorant views. The residents of South Park watch this on television and are embarrassed. They want to fix their image. They want the rest of the country to see them as a modern, socially aware, progressive community. Randy Marsh identifies the solution immediately: a Whole Foods market. Randy calls Whole Foods directly and makes his pitch. He tells them South Park wants to be the kind of community that Whole Foods represents. He explains that having a Whole Foods would instantly make South Park look like a town that cares about things, about quality, about the environment, about doing things the right way. Whole Foods agrees to send a representative to evaluate the town. This is the joke and the argument running together in the same sentence. The purpose of getting a Whole Foods is not to provide the residents of South Park with access to better food or a wider selection of groceries. The purpose is to be seen as the kind of place where a Whole Foods exists. The store is a signal, not a service. It tells people outside the town that South Park has arrived, that it has crossed the line from a small, backwards, unsophisticated community into the kind of place where educated, health-conscious, socially aware people choose to live. Randy is not thinking about food. Randy is thinking about reputation. And the dream, in its modern form, has learned to run very efficiently on reputation. You do not have to actually be better. You have to look like the kind of place that is better. For Whole Foods to come to South Park, the town needs to look a certain way. It needs to have the aesthetic of a progressive, forward-thinking community. It needs coffee shops with exposed brick and restaurants with small batch everything and apartment buildings with rooftop gardens. It needs the look of a neighborhood that has been thoughtfully developed for people who care about authenticity and quality and the environment. The problem is that the part of South Park most in need of development, the part that looks most run down and most in contrast with the image the town wants to project, is the area where Kenny McCormick's family lives. The McCormick family is the poorest family in South Park. This has been true since the show's first season. Kenny's house is small and falling apart. His parents struggle. His family does not have the things that most of the other families in the show take for granted. The McCormick home is not a charming fixer-upper. It is a house that shows, clearly and without decoration, what it looks like when a family does not have enough money. Mayor McDaniels, with Randy's enthusiastic involvement, decides to build a brand new gentrified district around Kenny's house. They name it Sodo Sopa, which stands for South of Downtown South Park. The name is a direct reference to the way real cities brand their gentrified neighborhoods. Soho in New York, Sodo in Seattle, names that turn compass misdirections into lifestyle signals. Sodo Sopa sounds expensive. Sodo Sopa sounds like somewhere you would want to be on a Saturday afternoon with a cold drink and a tote bag. The district goes up fast. New restaurants open, new shops appear, apartment buildings are constructed. The whole area is transformed from a struggling, rundown neighborhood into exactly the kind of vibrant, attractive, carefully designed space that a Whole Foods representative would look at and feel good about. And Kenny's house is still right in the middle of it. This is the part the show holds up and looks at directly. The gentrification of Sodo Sopa does not displace Kenny's family immediately. Instead, it does something in some ways more pointed. It builds around them. The new restaurants and shops go up on either side of the McCormick home. The upscale apartments are constructed within sight of it. The whole operation is designed to keep the house visible because the poverty of the original residents is not an embarrassment to the developers. It is a selling point. Sodo Sopa starts running commercials. The commercials are filmed in live action rather than animation, which makes them look exactly like real advertisements for real gentrified neighborhoods. They are shot beautifully. Warm light, slow camera movements, the kind of visual language that makes everything look like it was chosen with care. The voice in the commercials is low and slow and sincere. A voice that makes you want to believe what it is saying. The commercials tell you about the authentic character of Sodo Sopa. They tell you about the community. They mention Kenny's house specifically, referring to it as historic. They talk about the original residents of the area, suggesting that the development is done in partnership with the people who were there before, that the new businesses are supporting the community that already existed. The commercials are warm and generous, and they describe something that is not happening. None of Kenny's family works at any of the new restaurants or shops. None of them receives any benefit from the businesses that have been built around their home. Nobody asked Kenny's family whether they wanted any of this. The only thing the development has given them is a location that is now impossible to enjoy because the nightlife of Sodo Sopa goes on right outside Kenny's bedroom window, keeping him awake. The district uses the poverty of the McCormick family as atmosphere. It frames their difficult life as scenery. It calls their struggling home historic and then builds expensive things next to it and charges money to be near it. Kenny's little sister asks her father why they cannot go outside and enjoy the new neighborhood. Her father tells her they cannot. The camera holds on this exchange for long enough that the joke stops being a joke. This is not a fictional invention. The Sodo Sopa commercials were so accurate in their parody that multiple journalists and urban planning writers cited this episode when writing about gentrification in real American cities in 2015. The language that the commercials use, the emphasis on community, on authenticity, on supporting original residents, on the exciting combination of old character and new energy, was the exact language being used in real advertisements for real neighborhoods that were doing exactly what Sodo Sopa was doing, pricing out the people who lived there while using their presence as a marketing tool. Randy is involved in all of this. Randy is not the show's villain in this episode. Mayor McDaniels is nominally in charge, and the decision is a collective one involving the whole town. But Randy is the one who made the phone call. Randy is the one who identified getting a Whole Foods as the solution to the town's image problem. Randy is the one who helped design and promote the district. Randy is doing what Randy always does, finding an angle that looks like ambition and feels like progress and causes damage that he does not fully see and would not fully acknowledge if he did. The Whole Foods representative arrives in town and moves through Sodo Sopa. He speaks with PC Principal, who is season 19's embodiment of progressive performance, a man who enforces the language of social consciousness with total aggression, while understanding very little about the actual conditions of the people the language is supposed to represent. The representative seems impressed. Things appear to be going well for the town's application. Then Randy and some of the other residents discover that a competing gentrification project has started on the other side of town. Mr. Kim, who runs City Walk, has been trying to rebrand his own neighborhood as CTPA Town, which in Mr. Kim's accent becomes a name that the show uses as a running joke, but which is essentially just describing the poor part of town in direct terms. Mr. Kim has hired a child labor force to staff his operation, including Kenny, who has taken a job there because his family needs the money and there are no jobs available to him anywhere else. A mob of South Park residents marches towards City Walk, furious about the competing district. A fight breaks out between the adults and the child workers. It is happening in the street, in broad daylight, and the Whole Foods representative is watching. The representative clears his throat. Everyone stops. They look at him. He tells them that he has never seen a town trying so hard to pretend to be socially conscious. He tells them that this is exactly the kind of community Whole Foods is looking for, and that South Park will be getting its market. The crowd cheers. They have earned their Whole Foods by being caught at their most hypocritical, and the Whole Foods representative found their hypocrisy charming rather than disqualifying, because it is the same hypocrisy Whole Foods has always operated within. The representative is not rewarding South Park despite their performance, he is rewarding them because of it. The performance is the product. The appearance of progressive values is exactly what Whole Foods has always sold, and South Park has demonstrated that it understands how that sale works. The episode ends with the Whole Foods going up in CT Paytown rather than Sodo Sopa. Sodo Sopa, without the anchor of the Whole Foods to keep it commercially viable, starts emptying out. The expensive restaurants and shops lose their customers. The apartments lose their appeal. The district that was built around Kenny's house begins to deteriorate. Kenny's family is left with the lights going off and the noise dying down, and the neighborhood returning to roughly what it was before, minus the specific indignity of being used as atmospheric decoration. Kenny spends his wages from City Walk on a doll for his little sister. He gives her the doll. She smiles. Kenny goes to sleep in his room with the noise of Sodo Sopa still going on outside his window on what is apparently the district's last busy night. This is the episode's quiet, deliberate final image of Kenny. A kid who worked for almost nothing, gave what he earned to someone he loves, and goes to sleep in a house that the town decided to use and then discard. The city as a whole celebrates its new Whole Foods. The commercial at the end of the episode shows the residents of South Park shopping happily at Whole Foods, congratulating themselves on being the kind of community that has one. There are minority residents in the commercial looking slightly confused, present in the frame as signals of diversity rather than as people who chose to be there. South Park has always used Kenny's poverty as part of his character. He dies constantly. His family struggles visibly and persistently. The show does not sentimentalize this. It is part of the texture of the show's world. But the city part of town is unusual because it looks directly at what it means for a community to be aware of someone's poverty and decide to use it rather than address it. The town of South Park does not help the McCormick family. It builds a brand around them. When the brand stops working, it moves on. The American Dream's promise in this episode is not made to Kenny. The dream is not offered to him. He is too poor to be a participant in the dream. He is scenery for other people's dreams. His house is historic. His family's struggle is rustic charm. The people chasing success and progress and the validation of a Whole Foods in their town use his existence as evidence that their development project has roots, has character, has the authentic texture of a real community. Kenny just wants to buy his sister a toy. What the city part of town is arguing, underneath all the specific comedy of Sodo Sopa and Whole Foods and PC Principle, is that the version of the American dream being sold in the 21st century has learned to use the language of community and progress and social awareness as a cover for the same displacement and exploitation that earlier versions of the dream were more honest about. The gnomes at least wrote the question mark down. The Sodo Sopa developers wrote the question mark in the language of inclusion and partnership and historic preservation, and built it into a commercial and hired someone with a low, warm voice to read it over beautiful slow-motion footage of a neighborhood being hollowed out. Randy made the phone call, the town built the district. Kenny's family sat inside it and could not afford to eat at any of the restaurants outside their window. The dream found a new name. The damage looked the same. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. But if the city part of town is about what the dream does when it arrives from outside with good lighting and soft language, the next section is about what the dream demands from the inside, what it asks you to do to your own body, what it requires you to sacrifice in ways that are not metaphorical at all, in ways that are as literal and physical and grotesque as a man putting himself in front of a microwave and pressing start. Section 8. Medicinal fried chicken. The dream requires bodily sacrifice. Season 14, Episode 3. Medicinal fried chicken. Aired March 31st, 2010. There is a moment early in this episode where Randy Marsh sits in a doctor's office and receives genuinely good news. His health is perfect. His body is working exactly the way a body is supposed to work. work. His blood pressure is fine, his weight is acceptable, his organs are doing their jobs without complaint. The doctor tells him this with the satisfaction of someone delivering a positive result, and Randy's face falls. He is devastated, not because he wanted to be sick, not because he enjoys suffering. Randy is devastated because being healthy means he does not qualify. The system has a gate, and the gate only opens for people with a specific kind of damage, and Randy does not have that damage yet. He walked in hoping to be broken enough to receive what he wanted, and the doctor has told him he is not broken enough, and now he has to go home and figure out how to fix that. What Randy wants is access to the new medical marijuana dispensary that is open in South Park, after the local KFC was shut down by a state law banning fast food from low-income areas. The dispensary is right there. The product is legal and available, and being sold to people who need it for medical reasons. Randy needs it for the reason that Randy needs most things. He wants it, and wanting it feels urgent enough to be classified as a need. But the system has rules. You have to be sick. You have to have something wrong with you. You have to demonstrate with paperwork and a doctor's signature that your desire for the product is medically justified. Randy cannot simply walk in and buy what he wants. He has to earn the right to buy it by proving that his body requires it. So Randy goes home and gives himself cancer. This is not a metaphor. This is not an exaggeration of something smaller. Randy Marsh researches cancer, identifies testicular cancer as one of the most aggressive forms achievable through radiation exposure, and puts his private parts in the microwave. He stands in his kitchen and irradiates his own body because the system requires him to be damaged before it will serve him. He does the damage himself. He shows up the next morning with testicles that have swollen to the size of something that requires a wheelbarrow to transport, goes back to the doctor, receives his diagnosis of testicular cancer, gets his medical referral, and walks to the dispensary to fill it. He does this with the energy of a man who has solved a problem. The problem was that he did not qualify. He found a way to qualify. In Randy's mind, this is not self-destruction. This is resourcefulness. That is the joke. That is also the argument. The American dream, in almost every version it has ever been sold, requires sacrifice. This is not the dark side of the dream. This is the feature. The sacrifice is presented as the proof that you deserve what you are trying to get. You work long hours. You give up comfort. You delay the things you want in favor of the things you are building toward. You put your body and your time and your health into the machine, and the machine produces reward. The sacrifice is not incidental to the dream. The sacrifice is the moral justification for the reward. You earned it because you suffered for it. Randy takes this logic and follows it to its physical endpoint. The system says you must be damaged to receive what you want. Randy becomes damaged. The sacrifice is the microwave. The reward is the marijuana. The moral justification, I earned this because I suffered for it, is technically valid. He did suffer. He gave himself cancer. He wheeled his enormous radiation-swollen body into the dispensary and presented his legitimate medical paperwork and received his legitimate medical marijuana. By the rules of the system, he earned it. The fact that the suffering was self-inflicted and unnecessary and grotesque and wrong does not change the system's response to it. The system does not ask how you got damaged. It asks whether you are damaged enough to qualify. Randy qualified. What happens next escalates in the way that South Park escalates things, with total commitment to the internal logic of the scenario and no willingness to pull back once the direction is established. Randy starts smoking marijuana. His testicles continue to grow. He is happy in the way that Randy is always happy when a scheme is working. Completely, totally, with the specific brightness of a man who believes he has outmaneuvered a situation that should have stopped him. He talks to his friends about the marijuana. His friends want marijuana too. Randy refuses to share his medical marijuana because sharing it would be illegal, and Randy has spent too much effort on legal compliance to start breaking rules now. He encourages his friends to also give themselves testicular cancer. His friends do this. Men across South Park start microwaving their private parts. The doctor's office is filling up with patients who all have the same condition and all received it the same way, though the doctor has not figured this out yet. He believes, incorrectly, that the absence of KFC in the low-income areas is somehow causing the spike in testicular cancer because the cancer started appearing when the KFC closed. He assumes the chicken was protecting people from the cancer. He is wrong. The men are giving themselves cancer with microwaves, but the doctor's incorrect conclusion eventually drives the resolution of the episode, which is one of South Park's purest examples of systemic absurdity. A problem caused by one bad decision gets solved by a worse decision made for the wrong reasons, and the system declares the outcome a success. Randy's testicles grow large enough that he can no longer fit through the doors of the dispensary. This is a specific and concrete problem. The product he damaged himself to access is now now inaccessible because the damage has made him too large to reach it. He is standing outside a door he cannot walk through, holding paperwork that proves he deserves to be inside, unable to get in. Randy and the other men, a growing group of South Park residents with wheelbarrows full of their own oversized, radiation-damaged bodies, organize a protest. They stand outside the dispensary with signs. Their chant is, "What do we want? Bigger doors. Where do we want them? Weed stores." They are protesting for the right to access a thing they damaged themselves to access. They are demanding that the system accommodate the consequences of what the system's requirements drove them to do to themselves. This protest is one of the most precise images in the episode, because it mirrors exactly what happens in the real world when people are harmed by the hoops a system makes them jump through to receive what they were told they could have. The response is not to examine whether the hoops were reasonable. The response is to protest for better accommodation of the damage. The system does not get questioned. The system just gets asked to adjust its doors. At the protest, a dispensary owner makes a suggestion that is so simple and so obviously correct that the assembled politicians and officials and angry men with wheelbarrows treat it as slightly beside the point. He says that marijuana should just be legal. He says that people are clearly abusing the medical system anyway. He says this surrounded by men who gave themselves cancer specifically to abuse the medical system, and that the obvious solution is to remove the system that made the abuse necessary. Make it legal for anyone to buy it. Remove the gate. Stop requiring people to prove they are damaged enough to deserve it. Nobody acts on this suggestion. Instead, a doctor announces his incorrect theory about KFC and testicular cancer, and the state responds by banning marijuana again and re-legalizing KFC, now rebranded as medicinal fried chicken. Randy has his cancerous testicles removed. He gets prosthetic replacements. He gives Sharon the skin from his removed testicles as a coat. She is delighted by this. The other women in South Park are jealous of the coat. This is the resolution. Not justice, not wisdom, not the system improving itself. Just a reshuffling of which product is now the one you need a medical justification to access and which one you can buy freely again. The gate moved. The men are still damaged. The coat is made of what the damage cost. The episode aired in March 2010 when Colorado was actively discussing revising its medical marijuana laws. South Park is set in Colorado. The timing was not accidental. Parker and Stone were watching their state navigate exactly the dynamic the episode describes. A system that had created a medical justification requirement for a product that a large number of people wanted for non-medical reasons, producing a population of people who were creatively interpreting the medical justification requirement in order to access what they wanted. The episode took that dynamic and pushed it to its physical extreme, but the extreme was not as far from reality as it might have looked. People were finding ways to qualify. The qualification requirement was producing absurd behavior. The simplest solution, remove the qualification requirement, was being discussed and resisted for reasons that had more to do with political comfort than public health. Colorado legalized marijuana for recreational use in 2012. Randy's scheme became unnecessary 2 years after the episode aired, but the argument the episode makes is not really about marijuana law. It is about what systems do to people when they put gates between people and things those people want. The gates do not stop the wanting. They just shape the behavior that the wanting produces. They make people inventive in ways that damage them, creative in ways that cost them, persistent in ways that bend them out of the shape they started in. Randy wanted marijuana. The system said, prove you need it. Randy proved he needed it by making himself need it. The system accepted his proof. The damage was the price. He paid it without hesitation because the dream has always told him that paying the price is what separates the people who get things from the people who do not. What makes this episode more than just a very funny story about a man with enormous self-inflicted cancer is the way it connects to everything else the show has said about Randy across 14 seasons. Randy does not microwave himself because he is reckless. He does it because he has spent his whole life believing that the way to get what you want is to find the requirement and meet it, whatever the requirement is, whatever it costs, whatever condition it leaves you in. You get the medical marijuana by being sick enough. You get the respect by being impressive enough. You get the happiness by succeeding enough. You meet the requirement, you present your paperwork, you collect your reward. The system keeps moving the gate. Randy keeps following it. The cost of following keeps accumulating in his body, his marriage, his family, his relationships, his sense of who he is when nobody is watching. In medicinal fried chicken, the cost is visible and physical and impossible to ignore because it requires a wheelbarrow. In most of Randy's other schemes, the cost is less visible. It is absorbed by Sharon's patience and Stan's childhood and the family's stability and the slow erosion of the things that were actually working before Randy decided they needed to be replaced with something better. But visible or invisible, the cost is always there. The dream requires sacrifice. Randy has always been willing to sacrifice. The question the show keeps asking, quietly and persistently across more than 2 decades of episodes, is whether the person doing the sacrificing is fully aware of what they are sacrificing, and whether they would still make the trade if they were. Randy would still make the trade. That is the saddest part. Not the wheelbarrow, not the coat made of what the damage cost, not the swollen, radiation-burned body walking proudly toward a door it cannot fit through. The saddest part is that Randy would do all of it again tomorrow for the next thing, with the same complete confidence that this time, the sacrifice will produce the reward the dream has always been promising. The episode also runs a parallel story about Cartman becoming a black market fried chicken dealer after KFC is shut down in South Park. Cartman builds a small criminal enterprise, works his way up through the local distribution network, takes over the operation from the existing supplier, and then loses control of it when it escalates beyond what he can manage. His story in this episode is a compressed version of every Cartman business scheme. Fast entry, quick dominance, collapse when the operation gets larger than him. The two stories run alongside each other without directly intersecting, and the parallel is deliberate. Both Randy and Cartman are trying to access something the system has decided to restrict. One is destroying his body to qualify for the legal version, the other is building a criminal operation to access the illegal version. Both of them are working harder and risking more than they would need to if the system's gate was not there. Both of them are products of a system that creates the behavior it then punishes. The episode was watched by almost 3 million people when it aired, making it one of the most watched cable television shows of that week. It was rated nearly 9 out of 10 by major reviewers. People found it brilliant and disgusting and very funny and strangely relatable. The relatable part is the most important part. Nobody watching the episode has microwaved their own body for a medical card, but a significant number of people watching it have done something that follows the same logic, have damaged themselves in some way, have bent themselves out of shape, have paid a cost they did not need to pay because the system said the gate was the gate and the requirement was the requirement, and if you wanted to get through, you had to qualify. Randy qualified. The coat proves it. The damage the dream demands does not always involve a microwave and a doctor's note. Sometimes it is subtler. Sometimes it happens over years, slowly, across the kind of decisions that do not look like sacrifices when you are making them, but reveal themselves as sacrifices only from a distance. __quote _9 __. The next section is about what happens when Randy takes his dream overseas. When the logic that drove him to a wheelbarrow and a medical marijuana card gets scaled up to international business, and the thing that the expansion requires him to sacrifice is not his body, but something that was supposed to be the whole point. Section 9, quote 10. When the dream goes global and loses its soul. Season 23, Episode 2. Banned in China. Aired October 2nd, 2019. Randy Marsh named his farm Tegrity. He built his commercials around the word. He said it slowly and warmly into the microphone, letting it fill the space around it, letting it do the work of telling people who he was and what his business stood for. Tegrity, the thing that separates the honest operator from the sellout. The thing that means you do not compromise what you believe in for the sake of what you can get. The thing that Randy Marsh said repeatedly and sincerely was the foundation of everything he was building on that farm. Season 23, Episode 2 is the episode where Randy kills Winnie the Pooh for a trade deal. Not metaphorically, not in a way that can be explained away or softened by context. Randy Marsh lures a cartoon bear named Winnie the Pooh into a dark alley using a trail of honey, and when Winnie reaches the end of the trail, Randy strangles him to death. Piglet watches. Randy does this because killing Winnie the Pooh is the condition that a business partner has set for closing a deal that will make Tegrity Farms marijuana legal in China and deliver a truck full of money to the farm. Randy meets the condition. He closes the deal. He goes home covered in blood and honey and sits down to dinner with his family. Stan figures out what happened. He asks Randy directly. Randy confirms it. Stan gets up from the table and goes to his room to write a song about his father. He does not yell. He does not cry. He He just leaves, because there is a point at which the behavior of someone you love stops producing emotions that have names and starts producing a kind of quiet, exhausted recognition that the person in front of you has become something you cannot fully explain. The integrity died somewhere in that alley. What came home to dinner was the thing that had been building underneath the integrity for seasons. The Randy who was always there, who always existed beneath the warm commercials and the sincere voice and the acoustic guitar, who would do whatever the deal required because the deal was the thing and the deal had become the point. This is what happens when the American dream goes global. The episode begins with Randy gathering the family in the living room to announce his plan. He has heard about the enormous business opportunities available to companies that expand into China. The Chinese market is massive. The profits available to businesses that successfully enter it are unlike anything available in the domestic market. Randy wants Tegrity Farms to be one of those businesses. He is flying to China tomorrow. Sharon points out that Stan has a concert tomorrow. Randy asks Stan to wear a Tegrity Farms t-shirt at the concert to promote the brand while Randy is away. He frames this as a contribution Stan can make to the family business, a way to help while Randy is working. Stan does not want to wear the Tegrity Farms t-shirt. Stan has never wanted to be on the farm in the first place. Stan has been writing songs about how much he hates the farm since they moved there. But Randy asks, and the ask is framed as a small thing, a minor favor. And the weight of Randy's certainty about the business is the kind of weight that is hard to push back against when you are a child. Randy boards the plane. What happens on that plane is the episode's first major argument, delivered without a single line of dialogue explaining it. Randy looks around at the other passengers and discovers that everyone on the plane is going to China to expand their business. NBA players are on the plane, Disney characters are on the plane, corporate representatives of every major American entertainment company are on the plane. The whole plane is full of American businesses heading to China to access the market. Randy is furious. He starts accusing the other passengers of stealing his idea. He genuinely believes that he thought of expanding a business into China and that everyone else on the plane somehow took this thought from him and acted on it before he could. He cannot process that the idea of expanding into a large, lucrative foreign market is not an original or personal idea. He cannot see that he is one of thousands of businesses making the same calculation at the same time. He is angry about the competition on a flight he chose to take to a market everyone was already in. This is Randy's psychology in miniature. The dream tells him that his ideas are his, that his ambitions are special, that his pursuit of success is a personal journey rather than a current he is swimming in alongside millions of other people. He cannot look at a plane full of people doing what he is doing and understand that this means what he is doing is ordinary. He can only understand it as theft. Randy arrives in China and goes through customs. The inspectors check his bag and find his marijuana. Randy did not research whether marijuana is legal in China before flying to China with marijuana. This is presented straightforwardly without embellishment. Randy Marsh, who is traveling to a foreign country specifically to make marijuana legally available in that country, did not check whether marijuana was legal in that country before getting on the plane with marijuana. He is arrested. He goes to prison. The Chinese prison is not played for easy comedy. The show depicts the conditions inside it with enough clarity to make the point. Prisoners are beaten. Forced labor is the daily reality. People are executed. The conditions are genuinely harsh, and Randy's presence in them is the show placing its central American dream character inside the reality of what the market he was trying to access actually runs on. The cheap labor, the suppressed rights, the controlled population. These are not incidental to China's market appeal. They are part of the reason the market works the way it works. Randy flew toward the money without thinking about the structure that produces it. In prison, Randy meets Winnie the Pooh and Piglet. They are there because internet jokes comparing the cartoon bear to China's president became popular, and the government responded by banning the character and imprisoning the character's fictional representative. Winnie the Pooh is in a Chinese prison because his image was used to criticize the government. Randy meets him and they share a cell. They become something close to friends, or at least cellmates who understand each other's situation. Randy stands up for Winnie in court. He tells the Chinese government that their treatment of prisoners lacks tegrity. He says this word, tegrity, in a Chinese courtroom to a Chinese tribunal as a genuine accusation about how the government conducts itself. In this moment, Randy is, briefly, the person his commercials claim he is. He is standing on a principle in a place where standing on a principle is genuinely dangerous. He has the tegrity he has been advertising. Then Mickey Mouse shows up. Mickey Mouse in this episode is is not the friendly, harmless children's character. Mickey Mouse is Disney's representative on the ground, managing the company's relationship with the Chinese market. He is furious with Randy for criticizing the Chinese government in a way that could jeopardize Disney's access to Chinese audiences. He is furious with every Disney character on the plane who has expressed any opinion about Chinese policy that could be read as critical. Mickey Mouse is running a business operation, and the business operation requires silence about human rights, silence about prison conditions, silence about the treatment of people like Winnie the Pooh. You do not get to have principles and have the Chinese market. You choose. Mickey and Randy make their case to the Chinese officials together. They want to bring Tegrity marijuana into China legally. The officials are interested, but there is a condition. The condition is Winnie the Pooh. While the character remains associated with criticism of the president, his presence in any media connected to businesses seeking Chinese approval is a problem. Winnie needs to go away. Mickey Mouse makes clear what going away means. Randy has a choice. He can walk away from the deal. He can take the position that there are things he will not do for money, that his friendship with a cartoon bear in a prison cell means something, that the Tegrity he has been selling on his commercials is real and not negotiable. Stan makes this choice later in the same episode, walking away from his own film project rather than let Chinese censors remove everything honest from it. Stan says directly that anyone who would compromise their beliefs just to make money in China is not worth anything. Stan means this. Stan does not make the deal. Randy makes the deal. He lures Winnie the Pooh out of the cell with honey. He leads him through a trail of honey into a dark alley. Winnie follows the honey happily, eating it as he goes, not noticing Randy until it is too late. Randy strangles him. Piglet watches from the entrance of the alley. The deed is done. The deal is closed. The dump truck full of money arrives at the farm. The father and son sit at the dinner table. Randy is covered in blood and honey. Stan works it out. Randy confirms it. Stan leaves. The meal ends. The real-world consequences of this episode are worth naming because they are completely factual and completely remarkable. South Park was banned in China as a result of Banned in China. Every trace of the show was removed from Chinese social media platforms and streaming services. Chinese internet searches for South Park returned no results. The ban was total and essentially immediate. Parker and Stone responded to the ban with a statement that is one of the most precise things anyone has ever said about the choice the episode dramatizes. They said they would like to apologize to China, just like the NBA did, and just like other American companies did, and that they too would like to welcome the Chinese government and its leaders into the living rooms and hearts and minds of their viewers. Then they said that since they, like the NBA, valued their Chinese audience, they would not be making that apology. They said, in the language of business courtesy, that they had chosen to be Stan rather than Randy. They said it without saying it. The statement was widely understood. The NBA reference in the statement was specific. Around the time the episode aired, the Houston Rockets general manager had posted a tweet expressing support for protesters in Hong Kong. The Chinese government responded by threatening to remove NBA broadcasts from Chinese television. The NBA's response was to apologize extensively and distance itself from the tweet. The contrast between the NBA's apology and South Park's statement was the show demonstrating, outside of fiction, the same choice it had dramatized inside it. Some people choose the market. Some people choose the principle. The show chose the principle and accepted the consequences. The consequences for the show were real. Being banned in China means losing access to one of the largest entertainment markets in the world. It means that every South Park episode, every streaming revenue stream, every licensing opportunity connected to that market, gone. Parker and Stone knew this was the likely outcome of making the episode. They made it anyway. This is the episode's deepest argument, and it lives outside the fiction rather than inside it. The show was able to make the choice its characters could not universally make, because Parker and Stone had something Randy never had: the ability to look at the deal and decide it was not worth it. Randy could not make that calculation. Randy has never been able to make that calculation. The deal is always worth it for Randy, because the alternative is admitting that some things matter more than the business. And if some things matter more than the business, then the business was never the point, and the integrity was always real. And Randy has been doing enormous damage to the things that that matter in service of something that was supposed to serve them. That is a thought Randy cannot complete. It would require him to see the full picture of what the dream has cost him, and Randy has never been able to see that picture. He sees each scheme individually. He never steps back far enough to see them all together, to see what the pattern of them means, to see what the family has absorbed in order to keep him moving. Stan can see it. Stan has been seeing it for years. Stan writes songs about the farm. Stan gets up from the dinner table. Stan refuses to compromise his film for censors because Stan understands, at 10 years old, that the thing you give up to make the deal is the thing that made the deal worth making in the first place. You cannot sell integrity. You can only have it or not have it. The moment it becomes the thing you trade away to close a deal, it was never there to begin with. Randy traded it for honey and a dark alley and a dump truck full of money. The commercials kept running after that. The warm voice, the acoustic guitar, the slow camera movements over fields at sunrise. The word integrity said with total sincerity by the man who strangled the bear. There is one more thing this essay needs to look at. Not a scheme, not a single episode, but the full shape of what all of this adds up to. What the dream leaves behind when the farm is sold and the music stops and the family has scattered and the man who chased it sits somewhere in old age, alone with the memory of how close he always felt to finally having it. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. The next section is the end of the story. Not just Randy's end, the dream's end. What South Park, across 27 seasons and hundreds of episodes and one man's entire adult life, has been quietly and persistently saying about what happens to the person the dream chose and the people who had to watch. Section 10, The Collapse and the Void. What the dream costs the people watching it. Season 27, Episode 4, Sicko Fancy, 2024. Sharon sells the farm. Not Randy, Sharon. Randy does not make the decision to end Integrity Farms. Randy does not arrive at a moment of clarity where he looks at everything the farm has cost and decides that the cost is too high. Randy does not choose to stop. The farm ends because Sharon, who has watched every scheme and every phase and every new version of Randy for the entirety of their marriage, finally does the thing she has always had the quiet power to do. She sells it. The farm that Randy moved his family to without a real conversation. The farm he named after integrity while systematically destroying his own. The farm he went to prison for and strangled cartoon animals for and drove his son away for. Sharon sells it to an unknown buyer for a low price while Randy is not looking. This is how the American dream ends in South Park. Not with a dramatic collapse. Not with a reckoning where the person chasing it finally understands what they have done. It ends with someone else closing the door. It ends quietly, with poor sales and a transaction that barely registers, and a man who does not even get to be the one who decides it is over. The farm is gone. The dream has a different name now. It always will. To understand what this ending means, you have to go back to the beginning of the Integrity Farms arc and hold it next to the end at the same time. Randy moved the family in season 22 because he was tired of South Park. He was tired of what modern life had become. He wanted something real. He wanted to build something honest with his hands. He wanted integrity, his word, his invention. The thing he said was the foundation of everything. By the time Sharon sells the farm in season 27, here is what the Integrity produced. Randy went to prison for his business practices. Randy killed a beloved fictional character to secure a trade deal with a government that was actively imprisoning people for their beliefs. Randy slaughtered a field of cows with a shotgun while high as a solution to a pest problem he created himself. Randy lobbied local government to make it harder for other people to grow their own marijuana, specifically so his business would face less competition. Randy hired a black business partner as a cynical marketing move with no intention of sharing actual power or profit. Randy diversified into cocaine distribution during the winter months when cannabis was out of season. The farm that was supposed to represent a return to honest values became, season by season, a catalog of exactly the dishonest behavior Randy said he was leaving South Park to escape. And through all of it, the commercials kept running. The warm voice, the acoustic guitar, the word integrity. Randy's family paid for every item on that list. Sharon absorbed it. Stan grew up in the shadow of it, commuting an hour to school, watching his father choose the business over the family in decision after decision, writing songs about how much he hated the farm and the life it had forced on him. Shelley was pulled from her life in town without being asked. The family that appeared in the warm farm commercials, smiling in hemp clothing against a backdrop backdrop of fields and sunrise was a real family experiencing real damage behind the advertisement. The show imagines a future. In the special episodes called Post-COVID, set decades ahead of the main timeline, we see where everyone ends up. Randy in this future is old and living in a retirement home. He is estranged from Stan. Their relationship, which was already badly damaged by the farm years, has not recovered with time. Randy and Stan are not close in the way that fathers and sons who have worked through their differences are close. The distance between them is old and settled, the kind of distance that forms when enough things go unsaid for long enough that the silence becomes its own structure. In this future, Randy still thinks of the farm as the peak of his life. He still values it above everything else, including the family he damaged to build it. He still blames Stan for the farm's end, the man who chased the dream for his entire adult life, who sacrificed his marriage's stability and his children's peace and his own stated values in service of one scheme after another. That man ends up in a retirement home, old and alone, holding the memory of the farm like it was the realest thing he ever did. He is not wrong that it was the realest thing he ever did. That is the problem. Every other scheme came and went in an episode or two. The farm lasted 7 seasons. Randy committed to it more completely than he committed to anything else in his life, including the things that were actually worth committing to. He gave it everything. It gave him back a truck full of money that came from a deal that cost him whatever was left of his decency. And then it gave him poor sales and a quiet ending and an estranged son and an old age alone. Sharon is still alive in that future. She moved on. She closed the door on the farm and on that version of Randy, and she continued. Sharon, who spent decades absorbing the cost of Randy's dreams, is the one who survives them. This is not accidental. The show has always understood Sharon differently than Randy understands her. Randy sees Sharon as support, as the person who is supposed to be there when he comes home from each scheme, who is supposed to readjust when he announces the next phase. Sharon sees herself as a person whose life keeps being reshaped by someone else's inability to be still. Her line from "You're getting old, the same ridiculous thing every week," is the most honest thing anyone says about Randy across the entire show. Not cruel, not contemptuous, just the words of someone who has watched the pattern long enough to recognize it completely and who no longer has the energy to pretend she does not see it. Stan is the character who carries the true cost of the dream in this essay, because Stan is the one who had no choice about being near it. Randy chose the schemes. Sharon chose to stay, at least until she chose not to. Stan did not choose anything. Stan was born into a family where one parent's restlessness was the central organizing fact of daily life, and he grew up inside the consequences of that restlessness without ever having consented to them. Stan writes songs. This is the show's consistent image for how Stan processes what his father is. When Randy does something that moves past the point where Stan can have a normal emotional response to it, Stan goes to his room and writes a song. After Randy confirms he strangled Winnie the Pooh, Stan writes a song. The songwriting is not a hobby. It is how Stan survives having Randy for a father. It is what you do when the person who is supposed to be the stable center of your world keeps dissolving into the next version of himself, and you need somewhere to put what that feels like. In the future timeline, Stan is a grown man who works in his professional field and lives a life that is largely functional, but the estrangement from Randy is there. The distance is there. The farm, which ended his childhood in the countryside and damaged his relationship with his father beyond what time fully repaired, is still present in the space between them even decades later. This is what the American dream costs the people watching it, not the person chasing it. Randy always bounced back, always found the next thing, always moved forward with the same bright certainty that this time it was going to work. The cost is paid by the people who loved the dreamer and had to stay in place while he kept moving. Sharon's exhaustion, Stan's estrangement, Shelley displaced from her life, a family reorganized around one person's inability to accept that what he had was already enough. South Park has been saying this for 27 seasons. It has said it through comedy, through absurdity, through the most outrageous scenarios its writers could construct. Randy microwaving himself, Randy on a wheelbarrow, Randy as Lord, Randy in a Chinese prison, Randy covered in blood and honey at the dinner table. All of these are funny. They were designed to be funny, but underneath all of them, running quietly and consistently through the entire length of the show, is the same argument. The dream is not a path to happiness. The dream is a machine that converts the stability and love and presence that people actually need into fuel for the next scheme. It tells the person inside it that they are building something. It does not tell them what they are using to build it with. It does not show them the people standing in the wreckage of what they burned earned to keep moving. Randy never learned this. In the retirement home, alone, blaming Stan for the end of the farm, he still has not learned it. The dream does not come with a lesson. It comes with a next thing. And when the next thing stops coming, it leaves you with the inventory of what you traded for all the things that did not work out. The underpants gnomes still have their question mark. The Sodo Sopa commercials still have their warm voice and their soft lighting. Cartman is still 10 years old, still running the same calculation, still finding the space between what people want and what they have and charging for it. And Randy Marsh, the biggest dingbat in the entire show, the man built on the template of a real father who was a geologist in Colorado, is in a retirement home with a memory of a farm and a son he cannot reach. The American dream promised him everything. He paid for it with the things that were already there. That is the essay South Park has been writing since 1997. Not loudly, not with a lesson at the end of every episode, with a man and his family in a series of schemes and the slow, patient 27-season accumulation of what those schemes added up to. The farm is sold. The dream has a different name now. It always does. If you enjoyed this video essay, make sure to subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.